The Trump administration's planning to spend over $1.2 billion to build a massive 5,000-bed immigration jail at the Fort Bliss Army base in Texas.
A couple weeks ago, I wrote about ICE facilities and the conditions and treatment that are leading to an unprecedented increase in detainee deaths. In the past week, two major reports have been released documenting firsthand accounts from detainees inside of Florida's immigration detention facilities. For anyone who's sensitive to certain topics, I am going to be talking about medical and mental health emergencies, physical harm, and physical and sexual abuse. On July 22nd, WRLN released a report documenting an incident between guards and a 21-year-old Nicaraguan detainee at Florida's new Everglades detention facility. The 21-year-old had come to the U.S. as a student protester escaping Nicaragua's brutal dictatorship. After an argument with a guard over the facility's clothing rules, he said he was called the N-word before being painfully shackled in a 4x4-foot box in the sun with no water for over 6 hours. He said, "I did nothing violent. I don't deserve this. Nobody deserves this." When a friend of his, a detainee from Honduras, complained about this treatment, he was given the same punishment. The Miami Herald and multiple other outlets have reported that the vast majority of the hundreds detained at this facility have no criminal record, and multiple sources have reported that a 15-year-old boy from Mexico was detained there for at least 3 days. The day before that last report was released, Human Rights Watch released abusive practices at 3 Florida immigration detention centers since January 2025. They interviewed a range of detainees at Broward Transitional Center, Federal Detention Center, and Chrome Detention Center in Miami. A 47-year-old detainee named Juan told Human Rights Watch that when he was first brought to the Chrome detention facility, officers left him and others on the bus parked outside the entrance for almost 24 hours. Detainees weren't given food, water, or bathroom access, and they weren't let off the bus until almost 24 hours later when they were given a bathroom break, food, water, and then shoved back on the bus for another 24 hours. Another detainee named Andrea said that her bus made so many stops to pick up additional detainees that by the time they got to Chrome, the facility was closed for the night. This meant they had to sleep on the bus with no food or water, sharing one toilet that they could only use with one of their hands uncuffed. Her and 25 other women were placed in a visitation room that had been refitted for processing. She described this room as tiny. She spent 5 days in this processing cell and said that by the time she left, the number of other women in the room with her had risen to 31. ICE facilities make the conditions in these pre-processing areas particularly inhumane. 8 interviewees said they had been detained for up to 12 days at a time in what they referred to as La Hilera. Americans for Immigrant Justice are quoted in this report as saying at one point around 80 people were jammed into a room that displayed a sign establishing a maximum occupancy of 25. Quote, "We had on very light clothing and they would turn up the air conditioning to 500 miles an hour. You could not fall asleep because it was so cold. I thought I was going to experience hypothermia." An interviewee named Chawan described his processing as, quote, "days in hell," which is going to mean a lot more after we talk about the rest of his story. I want to start this section out with a couple of quotes. All 11 of those interviewed for this report who had been detained at Chrome said they were denied access to medication, including during their processing period. Detainees at Chrome said that only 5 individuals per cell were allowed to request a medical appointment each morning. Failures in the system resulted in preventable hospitalizations and contributed to the deaths of detained individuals. 2 women detained at Chrome, Andrea and another woman named Rosa, reported that guards had refused to give female detainees medication because it was a male-only detention facility. Andrea was detained with a woman with diabetes who was hospitalized after guards refused to give her insulin. Andrea was detained with another woman who had gallstones. After 2 days, she started vomiting. She started to lose consciousness and we were yelling for help. It took 2 hours to get the guards' attention and another 20 before they took her to the hospital. There, doctors removed her gallbladder. They brought her back to the cell in Chrome within 2 days. The man who talked about being forced to sleep on the bus, Juan, described pleading with guards to help a detainee in his cell who was visibly sick. They told him they couldn't do anything until processing was done. And when the detainee finally saw a nurse, she told him that he had suffered high blood pressure and probably a heart attack. 2 male detainees diagnosed with undetectable HIV reported guards refusing to give them their medication, and for one of these detainees, that resulted in his viral load rising to detectable levels. samples. One of these men is diagnosed with multiple chronic conditions and is supposed to have his labs done every 60 days. He reported that over his 7 months in detention, he had only been tested twice. In April, he collapsed while sitting at a table and, quote, "They took me out on a stretcher to the medical team. All they did was sit with me for 30 minutes and then send me back walking to my cell." Another interviewee told Human Rights Watch that when one of his cellmates sought medical attention for pain, guards laughed at him and told him he was faking it, only for him to later be diagnosed with tuberculosis. Another detainee named Sam had been prescribed 7 daily medications for conditions including severe migraines. He said on many occasions he wouldn't be given medication for as long as 3 days. Detainees go into this system in perfect health and often leave with lifelong debilitating injuries if they leave alive at all. A man named Antonio said that during recreational time he sustained injuries to both of his knees. Despite swelling and signs of infection, he was denied care. By the time he was hospitalized, staff at the hospital had to drain fluid from both of his knees and he required a wheelchair. A family member of Antonio said that he was told by hospital staff any further delay in treatment would have resulted in amputation. A few months before his knee injuries, Antonio said a fight had broken out between detainees, which he had got dragged into. After staff broke the fight up, they took him outside and beat him, causing him serious injury. He was denied an arm sling and provided only basic pain medication for a few days with no further treatment despite multiple requests to see a doctor. Another detainee named Carlos said in late May he was in severe pain and denied medical attention. "I had to throw myself on the floor, and when the officer told me to go outside for rec time, I said I could not get up. Finally, staff wheeled me to the medical team where the doctor told me I likely just had gas. I had to again refuse to leave until the doctor finally agreed to send me to the hospital. The doctor at the hospital did a CAT scan and saw that I had a strangulated abdominal wall hernia. The doctor told me that if I had not come in then, my intestines would likely have ruptured." Carlos told Human Rights Watch on June 25th, detention staff had not allowed anyone in his cell of 98 men to make a sick call in 6 days. The day before, an older man had complained to him about having trouble breathing and severe chest pains. "I called the lieutenant over and told him what was happening. He said that's not a medical emergency, do a sick call. I told him that we had not been allowed to do a sick call in 6 days, and he said, yeah, well that's the same situation for everyone right now." Carlos said the old man was only given medical attention after him and his cellmates launched a hunger strike. Carlos also had hypertension and was repeatedly denied his medication during this time. Chow Han, the man who described his processing as days in hell, suffers from diabetes, pancreatitis, and heart disease. Guards at Chrome consistently refused to give him his medication. In March, he was transferred from FDC to BTC, but despite repeated attempts to alert staff that his medication needed to travel with him, guards sent his medication to Chrome instead of Broward. After arriving at Broward, Chow Han was denied all medications, and 5 days later, he collapsed. Not only is healthcare being denied, but detainees asking for mental health support to deal with the trauma of detention are actively being punished for it. Rosa, one of the women who talked about staff denying medication to female detainees, said that detainees who request to see a mental health professional risk being placed in solitary confinement for extended periods, sometimes weeks. As a result, many avoid disclosing mental health concerns altogether. Rosa talked about a cellmate of hers who cried often and struggled with mental health, who had been placed in a psychiatric ward for weeks at a time. And when she returned to the cell, she told Rosa that her hands and feet had been restrained and that spending weeks in the ward had further traumatized her. Another detainee named Pedro described a cellmate of his begging for mental health support, and when it was denied, he began to self-harm. In response, 9 officers removed him from his cell and placed him in solitary confinement for a week. When he was put back in the cell with Pedro, he told him he hadn't received any medical or psychological care. One female detainee at Broward said, "If you ask for help, they isolate you. If you cry, they might take you away for 2 weeks, so people stay silent." ICE detention has been particularly abusive and difficult for female detainees. Many are in facilities that were up until a week or a month ago male only. Andrea and a woman named Maria said they were detained for the first 5 days in a cell with an exposed toilet that was visible through the windows of other visitation rooms that were housing men. If the men stood on top of a desk or a toilet and looked through the window, they could see them, and sometimes they got up to look at us. Andrea said at Chrome, her and other female detainees repeatedly begged officers to let them shower, but were told that Chrome is a male-only facility and that clearing a section for women to shower was not feasible. Only after protesting by placing signs in the window stating that they were being treated inhumanely 4 days into their detention, they were taken shackled to the mental health wing to shower and receive clean clothes. She said that that was the first time they had been outside for 4 days. Another woman said when she arrived at Chrome, her and a bunch of other female detainees were confined to a room with one toilet and it was covered in feces. We begged the officers to let us clean it, but they just said sarcastically, "Housekeeping will come soon." ICE facilities are notorious for keeping detainees in unsanitary conditions for extended periods of time. According to Americans for Immigrant Justice, in one instance, officers gave detained individuals a bucket in which to relieve themselves in front of each other. Another man named Brian said he was locked overnight in an exam room without food or water. Quote, "There was blood on the bed and around the toilet. I was sick, alone, and they left me there. I felt as if I was going to die. I just wanted my medication." Another man detained at Chrome said him and his cellmates were denied soap to wash their hands for at least 20 consecutive days. During this time, him and other detainees were forced to make bedding from shoes and food trays. Men detained at FDC reported that meals included meat that was sometimes still frozen. Lunch sometimes arrived as late as 6 p.m. and dinner as late as 10 p.m. Chauhan and Juan were both cellmates with a man who was a pancreatic cancer survivor. They said it took 3 requests for him to finally get authorization for the special diet that he required, and once the authorization went through, he was still just fed the same food that they gave everybody else. Chauhan also told Human Rights Watch that in mid-April at Federal Detention Center, dozens of men were gathered early in the morning, their feet shackled and their hands tied behind their backs. By 5 p.m., no one had had lunch. Some had not even had breakfast. We could see the food through the bars of our holding cell in styrofoam containers on a cart. The food was in front of us, but the guards refused to give it to us. At 7 p.m., they finally gave us lunch, but only after another guard protested on our behalf. We were chained, though, so we could not reach the plates with our hands. We had to put the plates on chairs and then bend down and eat with our mouths like dogs. That group remained restrained from that morning in the cell until they were loaded on transfer buses at 10 p.m. ICE facilities, especially since the increase in apprehensions and detentions, have used lockdowns as a way to keep detainees in their cells for arbitrary periods of time. Pedro said he was once locked down for 4 consecutive days, and him and Chauhan both observed that lockdowns were routinely triggered when the facility was short-staffed, sometimes only a single officer on duty, and lasted until the next shift arrived. Detainees in ICE facilities are often denied communication with their lawyers or family members. Andrea said she was only allowed to speak to her lawyer for 5 or 10 minutes, and Chauhan said that officers allowed him to make a phone call, but told him he was not allowed to discuss anything about the detention center and its conditions. They forced him to make the call on speakerphone with an officer present. Juan said for the first 2 days of his detention, he wasn't allowed to contact anyone, and no one in his family even knew where he was. Without legal counsel or help from family members on the outside, the AIJ alleged ICE's strategy was partly designed to coerce detained individuals to sign departure documents consenting to their removal and foregoing further immigration proceedings. A 44-year-old man named Maxim told his wife he was pressured to sign documents without a translator despite requesting one, and he did not understand what he signed. According to his wife, Maxim was in good health when he was detained, but shortly after being placed in his cell at Chrome, he began experiencing fever, chest pains, and other symptoms. Despite requests, he was not seen by a doctor for several days. He was diagnosed with elevated blood pressure and given basic pain relief and an antihistamine for a painful bruise sustained during his arrest. According to his wife, his high blood pressure went untreated, and Maxim would die in ICE custody in Florida. With the increase in funding and quotas for apprehension, detention, and deportation, human rights abuses, hospitalizations, and deaths are going to continue to occur in ICE detention facilities across the United States.